Hey, welcome to Backyard Professor Chess Videos. This is the very first chess game in Bobby Fischer's tournament record that Karsten Mullers put in his book. Played it in 1955. He was 12 years old at the time, and one of the tournament books for this year, not in this particular game, but one of them gave Bobby rating of 1870. So he was really well into chess by the time he was just a baker's dozen in years. So very interesting. Here he's playing the black. Let's take a look at, this was the, he does the King's Indian defense. This was the, his opponent is Humphrey, the U.S. Amateur Championship, under 13. So both players are just kids, and it is so fun to see how these guys were playing. They were obviously kids with a tremendous chess knowledge even at this point, which is encouraging because even we old duffs like myself can get something out of value for our games from these wonderful little squirts who gave of their time to play tournament chess so that we could learn. As if they had us in mind. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, they weren't thinking of you, you old fart. Get going. Okay, so Humphrey is building a strong pawn center, a big pawn center, and the idea with this, again, is to make sure your pieces are working to support your pawns. Don't just throw your pawns out there without the pieces. And the way to counteract the center is with your pawns, and you need to do so right now. Fischer understood that. In the King's Indian, you want to... The King's Indian, of course, is famous for the fianchettoed bishop and the castled king, yeah? Don't let him have this pawn center uncontested is the principle here. And you want to do a speedy development, which both of them do really, really well as far as that goes. And then e5, hitting the center. So they're playing pretty, and this is just typical standard for the King's Indian Open. It really is. It's not nothing new. And then he'll close the center. He'll push the d5. To d5, I should say. Bobby immediately. Now, I played through some other King's Indian in the process of preparing for this one, for the video, and Fischer's depth of his grasp, I should say, of understanding the opening principle and the actual middle game play of this was very strong, even by 12 years old. He had obviously been studying and playing a lot of chess, because now he's going to do a wing. He's going to make sure the wing is at least partially advanced. In some games, they really fight on the queen side. In this one in particular, Bobby didn't do that, but he's going to want to be at least a jump ahead of his opponent's A and B pawns. I think that's what he was thinking at this point. I don't know, he's a 12-year-old. You never know what 12-year-olds are thinking, right? Yeah, well, let's not go there, shall we? And now Bobby does an unusual move, knight e8. The consideration was also he could have fianchettoed this bishop, striking the cross across the center. He didn't do that at this point. He brought the knight. He's going to try to regroup, more or less. Queen comes up to c2, which is done quite a lot. And now knight c5. Black really likes this post for the knight in the King's Indian. As we get going into the game, that's played quite often, actually. And now, knight h2, Humphrey really has an interesting defense here. You know, I played through a dozen King's Indian games. I never saw that one once. I don't know if the chess bases show all of the... There's chess bases with millions and millions of games. It'd be interesting to see how many of them, how many people have played this. I don't think very many at all. And now, once again, once you lock the center in the pawns, you haven't exchanged centers so that you can have an open file, which is a pillar that I really like. You don't need one just yet anyway. But once you do that, then start pushing that F-pawn. That's how Fischer played this several times, and he had terrific results with it, which is really interesting. F3, and then he went ahead and went all the way to F4. With that pawn chain, he really puts the clamp on the dark squared bishop of white, doesn't he? Yeah, that's wow. I mean, his pawn structure seems better, and why? Why? Because Jeremy Silman's imbalance, the one he's emphasized, he has about 11 of them that I will discuss in this series as we see them, is space. The center is locked, so Fischer has chosen the Kingside. That's where they both castled. He's chosen Kingside to expand into space, which means it's going to make it more complicated for Humphrey to coordinate his pieces and get his pieces on the right squares. So this is a good way to play the King's Indian, right? And bishop will come to F2. Now, Humphrey, the white, has not left his king alone, as we've seen in previous videos. Several times during a kingside attack, you'll only see your opponent with maybe just the rook, sometimes a rook and a knight, sometimes a rook and a bishop, sometimes nothing but pawns. In this instance, Humphrey, his king is not in much danger yet. Fischer has really gained the space so that hopefully he can tactically and strategically put together a coordinated attack. Seems to me like at this point Humphrey has put together a really good defense at this point. I mean, you can see this is where the game is going to be played, so get ready right now. I think Humphrey's done an exemplary job of doing that. It's really a well done, at this point, a well done played game. Queen comes to G5, so there's no question that we want to play on the king side. Yeah. King H1 and then bishop D7. With the I've got a note here instead of king 1. The note said knight G4 was also a consideration for white, and what that would do, the knight's on the post, of course, yeah, but what that does is it blocks off direct access in a much stronger way. It would enable Humphrey to have kept the pawns locked in the chain so that there couldn't be a direct attack. There would have to be some exchange of pieces in order for Fischer to get to his king. So that was actually a strong consideration, in my opinion. But instead, Humphrey had gone to H1, and then we see Fischer bring his knight D, and then rook comes to G1. So it seems to me like he's guarded pretty well, and Fischer is trying to mount, and actually, another consideration here for white, and Fischer was kind of laser-minded that way too. When he decided, I'm going to attack, then man, he attacked. And if he decided, man, I need to defend, then he really did defend. He could, at this point, because the center is locked, there's not going to be any traffic through the center, he could play on both wings. That was one of Alekin's favorite techniques to do. Several of the players in just the era just before Fischer played this way. I'm not saying today's players don't play this way. They do. But a consideration rather than the knight, which there's no harm in that move at all, a consideration is B5 and start going on the queen side. open it up. I've been watching chess on Leitch's Chess TV, which is live games between people. And there's a lot of them, you guys, that are, I won't say scared or fearful, but are hesitant. That's the word I'm looking for. They're hesitant to, once, I've noticed this trend. Well, I mean, I've watched, 12 games. It's not a trend, but I've seen many instances where players, they either lock their pawns or they refrain from confronting each other in order to exchange pawns. I have seen at least 4 games where the position could have become a winning position if you push the pawn and exchange and open a file for your rooks. And there are so many players who are scared to do that. I don't know why. I shouldn't say scared, hesitate to do that, and I don't know why. Well, here we see Fischer not doing it himself, right? So instead he's come to here. So anyway, just an idea. I'm just throwing out. Noise, come on, show us the game already. Let's see, Black Knight F6. So, and now look, Humphrey also wants to gain a little space on the king side, but this move helps lock his pawns. Rather than the knight, he chooses the pawn instead. Yeah. The queen knight in a kingside, really, in so many instances, as we'll see, that's all you need to do a successful kingside attack. The queen is an absolute dynamo with the knight in an attack of somebody. It's something else. And we shall see many examples. Well, because he went 2, Fischer opens it up through the pawn en passant capture. You don't want to leave the king side closed. You're trying to attack that king. So Humphrey closing the lanes makes sense. Fischer opening the lanes makes sense. Besides, look at that great pawn fork. That's pretty good. That's not bad. The rook takes. Now, good move, right? Look at that. The queen is here, and instead of taking it with the bishop, which would have hit granite across the middle, the rook actually has a straight across from the opponent's king, but he will dominate that file if Humphrey plays this right. That's a good way to exchange that pawn, because now you put the queen at h6. Yeah? Not bad at all. For 12-year-olds, this is really well done, man. So queen bumps to h6, and now knight d1, and there was a, if I remember, I didn't put it here. I need to start putting more of these notes in here from Karsten Mullers. I believe there was a question mark here. That wasn't the way. Oh, maybe I did. White, bishop takes c5. Yeah, bishop takes c5 is what, rather than this. Now again, and we're talking kids, but I have seen this type of approach on Leitch's, on their live TV movements. It's not actual TV, you're just seeing the chess games, where they don't exchange because they're fearful of the pawn change, apparently. I keep saying fearful. I shouldn't say that. It's not because people are scared. But a consideration is taking that knight on c5. And that gives the board, that gives the game a different character, doesn't it? That gives it a completely different dynamic, depending on which pawn, you'd want to respond with this one, because there's your open file. And then you could bust through the queen side. If you're playing black and white did something like that, taking your beloved knight. However, that was That actually was a good consideration. However, instead he did, and this knight is quite useful in the game. At least he's activating it and making sure it's where he wants it to be. And now knight h5. Yeah, and this is also a typical move in the King's Indian. Now that you've secured the center, now that you've pushed the f5, you bump the f-pawn. Actually, you've used the f-pawn to open up a lane. Even though your opponent has it at this point, you've got a partial open file so that you can have targets so that you can begin to attack when the time is right, when your pieces are placed better. The knight coming into this is really typical of a King's Indian. So this is gearing up. This is gearing up, and then rook drops back to, you hit the rook. The rook is quite powerful, but if this knight can get into here and he can bring his other rook into here, it's going to be a screaming demon battle, right? That'll be quite fun to watch. And now the bishop takes h3, so the attack is on. So, whittling away at the cover, but you notice the king is not exposed. He really hasn't been in a lot of danger yet. Humphrey has a pretty good defense at this point. Not bad. Fischer's got his work cut out for him. And then the bishop... No. Hold on. Bishop takes h3. Now bishop comes to e3. Sorry. Humphrey's move is bishop e3. Good central bishop. He's coming down into here to the queen. He's got this bishop hitting the knight. He's got the rook on... Man, I'll tell you what. Neither player is giving an inch. They're both... their position here is pretty good for the Kingside play that they're doing. They're not bad. Very good game so far. Really cool. Knight. Oh, yeah. Fischer puts the knight on the outpost, of course, on f4. Boy, that puts him right square against the Kingside, doesn't it? Hitting the bishop, supporting his own bishop. He's right here. Boy, he's right there to support a bigger, heavier piece, a queen or a rook or whatever against king. That outpost is really well done. See, the nature of the pawn lock in the middle favors black for the simple reason that there is more space on the king side where Fischer decided to play, and he can put his pieces on more optimal squares, better position, which means a better attack. It's interesting how the imbalance just naturally leads to the better position as you are able to coordinate your moves easier. That is well worth taking stock of, We will put a lot of Jeremy Silman's ideas into this, as well as Artur Yusupov's, as well as Gary Kasparov's. I have the book by Kasparov on Fischer, My Great Predecessors, in the mail coming to me. I also have Fischer's book, My 60 Memorable Games, coming to me. I don't know what happened to my earlier edition. I lost it, but I've got a new one coming. So I'm going to have a lot of good materials, both from Bobby Fischer's point of view, from Karsten Mullers' point of view, his analysis, and from Gary Kasparov. I mean, it's going to be real fun to see what the heck. So, enough talking, dude, please. Knight f4, a very good outpost. Knight f2, so, see, Humphrey has activated his knight and brought it over here. Look, that's a great looking defense. This kid ain't giving him an inch, right? For a 12-year-old, that's not bad. We can take a lesson here, all of us. There are so many times where we get, and it's an odd phenomenon. If you get someone who starts pushing pawns on the queen side, you've both castled king side, and you get someone who starts pushing pawns on the queen side, all of a sudden everybody rushes all of their pieces over here to defend, and they leave the king all alone. Look at how evenly distributed the power is. That's not bad. I say evenly distributed. Actually, it's more concentrated on the center, even though it's locked, but it can jump either direction. That's not bad. And the same with Fischer. Well, Fischer's emphasis, though, is on the king side. Of course, we can see that because of his space advantage. But there's nothing really that catches our eye that's odd, that stands out. Oh, look, the king is all by himself. He's really not. That's a great game right now. For right now. That is really not bad. Bishop f6. So you notice that earlier he had put his knight on f6. In the process of getting the knight up to this gorgeous outpost, and now he's able to coordinate, and now he's able to put his bishop on f6. That's the advantage of space, man. Extra territory. This is a great example of that. That is what you want. Humphrey, I mean, his position is not set in concrete. You can't do that. But you can see how limited his options are, can't you? He can't just swing either one of his bishops way out wherever he wants them to go. They're more or less there, and whatever squares they cover is whatever squares they cover. Fischer is not quite that hemmed in. You can see that. So that's a good little lesson in this game for us. Space is important. And now, don't kid yourself, Humphrey wants to have more space, but he's going to utilize the fact that he's got the rook on the partial open file, and he can find targets. He's got targets. He's going to go with that, of course. Yes. Makes perfect sense. Bishop comes back down to d7. There's no reason to lose your bishop yet. On the other hand, oh yeah, I put my note wrong. Rather than the rook to g3, what would have happened had Humphrey done that? Take out the bishop, takes the sting out of the attack a little bit of Fischer. That would have been the knights. The knight would have exchanged real. On the other hand, I don't know. Fischer could have. Seems like the knight would be the active one to take instead of the bishop, though, doesn't it? So that's a different thing that White could have done to lessen the pressure on the king's side. An option that it would have been a little more active than the rook. Oh, I don't know. That didn't hurt him either. Fischer did bump his bishop down to d7. And now the knight here comes to g4. So you can see that they're both maneuvering. They both appear to have pretty good room, even though Fischer has more space. Humphrey is doing a sensational job of putting his pieces, coordinating them really decently in the more cramped position. He's not hurting, in other words. This is a great game. It almost looks like who's attacking who, actually, doesn't it? You know, is black on the attack? Well, yeah, it's Fischer. But is white on the attack? Yeah, you could make a case for that. Kind of interesting how that works, huh? However, that was too tempting of a target. The bishop does his job, and let's take the knight. Yeah. And the idea of keeping a shield, sort of, around his king appealed to Humphrey. He did not retake with the pawn. Apparently, the shield was a comfortable thing for him. I mean, look, he's not exactly getting trounced here, right? He's not exactly in really bad, necessary, imminent danger. He actually, if he can put together an attack of his own. So rather than open the position up, he seems to be more comfortable with the close position, and that's why he took it with his rook again. Notice the activity of this rook on that partial open file. That's a splendid picture of a rook being well used in a really good... And now look, there's been a couple of exchanges. Fischer has advanced the one pawn. His other f-pawn is gone. He did that in order to get an outpost. Both kings don't have the pawn cover, so white could get an attack going, it seems to me. Bring the other rook over here real quick and bam. So this is really cool. This is interesting. And the queen bumped down. Bobby's trying to protect his queen, keep his queen. He wants to coordinate his queen into the attack, but from behind the other pieces. So he's going to bring her back around and use her to push everything else forward. And then, yeah, here comes the other rook, see? Double your rooks on the file. Not an open file, a partial open file, but double your rooks on the file. Yeah, and, you know, if Fischer gets too strong in the attack, the way Humphrey has it set up, the bishop is keeping an eye on both of those knights on posts. Yeah. He's got it so that if he was to exchange, it really could be to his advantage, actually. That's kind of nice to see. He's doing really well. Both of these kids are doing really well at this point, I would argue. Rook a to g1, bishop to e7, queen to d2. Wants to keep in contact with the bishop. Now, is that an indication that he's going to get rid of that outpost and begin his own attack, undermine the opponent's center? Actually, Fischer does have the better posting of the knights. His knights, I mean, let's face it, his knights are better than the opponent's bishops at this point. But the bishops are doing well, the bishop. This one really is the bad bishop. It hasn't, I mean, it hasn't, Fischer hasn't tried to undermine any of the pawns or anything, so, but that bishop is the bad bishop. Humphrey would like to get that one exchanged if he could, although Fischer has already gotten rid of his weak bishop, or his bad bishop, so Fischer did the right strategy here. This bishop almost kind of gets in the way a little bit. We'll see how he handles it. Okay, queen d2, rook. Fischer wants to double up. Yeah, yeah. White should exchange. That's what my note says. Boy, I wrote my notes one move too late. Here I am obfuscating a discourse of magnificent proportions about a whole bunch of nothing that makes any sense whatsoever. And all I had to say was, he really does need to take that knight. He really does. Taking that knight. At this point, because of the setup, because of what Fischer is about to do, Humphrey should take the knight with it. Either the move previous or right now. That would help Humphrey. Because now if you get the double the rooks here, you know, although that back of the pawn chain is really well supported, but Humphrey needs to, the knight has become too dominant. It's going to play a real good role in an attack when it happens, so he's got to get rid of it. Open it up a little bit more, getting rid of this pawn too, so that he can bring his other bishop in if Humphrey wants to attack. We'll see what he does. Rook f7. Rook 1 to g3, and now Humphrey kind of loses track. And so does Fischer. Fischer did double, but it said, yeah, he wants to double the rooks. He wants to open up a lane, just like Humphrey wants to open up a lane. However, look, if he would have done, here's the note of Müller, M umlaut U-L-L-E-R, Müller. It's a U sound in German. I learned that way back in when I took German 25 years ago. That was about all I learned. Das ist ausgezeichnet, yes. Yeah. Well, I did learn Es regnet heute, because it is. Es regnet heute. It is raining today. Es ist sehr windig. It's very windy also, yeah. H5 would have been strong here. I mean, they're doubling the books on the file, but this is the one that it's time for Bobby to crack it open. He appears, granted, he's only 12. I mean, come on, give the kid a break. He appears to keep wanting to build it up strongly, and there is nothing wrong with that attitude. Man, Fischer carried this attitude with him throughout his entire chess career. Thank goodness, because it gave us great games to study, right? He's still building up, and yet he can get this strength in it, but start hitting, throw your opponent off kilter, start hitting him a little bit. Counter punch. Well, maybe that's what he's trying to do, you know. Hey, he doubled his rooks, I'm going to double mine. Maybe that's what he was thinking, right? In his mind, he is counter punching. That's not bad. So, yeah, I'm not being critical, I'm just showing possibilities. And, now finally, the bishop does take the knight. Yeah. Muller's been indicating that for the last couple of moves. He's been saying, you really got to start opening this up. And now, because of how Bobby moved, he doesn't have to exchange it with the pawn and eliminate his fabulous center. It's to Bobby's advantage to keep the center locked in this position because it gave him more space. There's no reason to open it up and let Humphrey get more space and hence able to coordinate his pieces more. So now Fischer takes a piece with a rook on the outpost. Not bad. Not bad. Yeah. Instead of the pawn. Because that helps keep counterplay down to a minimum. What do I mean by that? If Fischer had taken it with the pawn, now Humphrey, in order to blast things open, can begin pushing pawns. And now there's going to be exchanges and openings, and all of a sudden the queen and the bishop can get in. So why open it up to give Humphrey counterplay like that when he can keep the squeeze on him here? When he can keep him settled? No question marks. I know he's not going to have counterplay in the center, meaning a counterattack. This way, I am attacking. You see how that works? That's really kind of cool to see. Now he's taking it with the rook. Rook takes f4. Rook. Oh, whoops. f4 I meant. Golly. There we go. Rook takes f4. Rook goes to h3. And queen coming over to f7. Now, all three big heavy power pieces are on the same file. That looks somewhat spooky if you're black. That's pretty good. And then rook at g goes to g3 because, of course, the pressure is on the f3 pawn. Absolutely. However, it is so well protected, Fischer just can't break through. Humphrey is the same way. Fischer wanted to keep the center locked. Humphrey wants to keep this. Humphrey wants to keep his chain too. Right? I mean, look at this. You got one rook, two rooks, a knight, and a bishop. Yeah, no, I don't want you to come in, man. Rightly so, too. I mean, gosh. Really well played game, isn't it? Bishop h4. Target. Hit the rook. Yeah. Hit the rook. And now rook to g4. And bishop goes to f2. Now here's where Bobby played it a little weak. Yeah. Actually it drew. They drew after this. Yeah, bishop went to d1 and then they drew. It was a draw. So his first tournament game was a draw. And the comment here at this point, the comment was, rather than bishop f2, what if the rook took g4? Let's see what happens here. Remember, 12-year-olds, and to be able to play so well, to be able to grasp and understand and put it into their game that I want the center locked so that I can conduct a kingside attack. And for both opponents, Humphrey also said, I will agree to keeping the center locked because it helps my defense. It's a two-sided coin. Both players benefited from the locked center. That's kind of cool to see. The comment is, if he takes it with the rook, or, okay, black rook take g4. Wait a minute. Hold on. That was one of the options. But if, where is the D? Okay, so rook. Oh, I see what I did. Fischer went to here, and then he went to d1. Okay, so from this point, after the draw, the idea was to take the rook. You should have took the rook. However, in this instance, after the game is done, if black comes here to d4, oh, this is my variation. I'm trying to see, is the draw justified? So, here's what I came up with. If black goes to d4, then rook takes f4, get rid of the rook, and then queen will take f4. Yeah, this is me. This isn't Muller. And then queen takes queen, and then rook takes queen. So see, it's a more like the way they had set it up. It's going to end up being more or less a liquidation rather than one side being able to win or lose. Bishop takes b2. Bishop comes to c2. See, you can see why they drew. There's just not any kind of a major breakthrough for either player to be able to get a real good advantage. Yes, they've got outposts and all, but it really doesn't give any effect to help one or the other. And so h5, and at h5, yeah, it's still just evenly matched. No one really was able to find a complete breakthrough. So, seems to me like the draw was justified based on that little bit further excursion into it. So there is Bobby Fischer's first tournament chess game. Lots of stuff to learn. I probably will end up emphasizing his later games with a little bit more analysis, variation, and detail, simply because he had grown in such magnificent chess strength so speedily. I mean, he was going to become U.S. chess champion just shortly, and he's only 12 here. So anyway, there's your chess game. I hope you got something out of it. We are on our way to exploring every single one of Bobby Fischer's chess game tournaments to improve our chess and to appreciate such a great chess player and to appreciate further such a splendid game that has evolved from India, I believe, 600 BC. Chaturanga is what it was called. I've got Davidson's History of Chess. It's fun to read. I think I'll reread it this year, just for kicks and giggles. It's got some fun tidbits of information. Alrighty. Remember, drink lots of water, be good, have fun, do well, be kind, work hard, study well, come and join us on the Backyard Professor Fan Club. I'm not saying that to feed my vanity. No, Joanne, Joene. God, he's going to kill me if he ever meets me because I'm probably mispronouncing his name. I apologize. He's from the Netherlands. He's the captain of our team. He's the one that put this thing together. And so I jumped in it. There's like 57 of us right now, and we are having a ball, aren't we? I mean, seriously, those of us who are involved, it's great to get together with like-minded people and figure out chess together. So, alrighty, stick around. I have 734 more videos to go. Woohoo!